The air reeked of damp earth and fear as Nkem, her wrist raw from the tight ropes binding her, stared at the locked iron door. The muffled cries of others in the next room reminded her she wasn't alone in this nightmare. But she also knew one thing: if she didn't escape tonight, she might never see daylight again. Her fingers traced the small key she had managed to steal, knowing it was her only chance at freedom. In the quiet Nigerian village of Umuk, life moved to the rhythm of the cock's crow, the chatter of market women, and the occasional rumble of an old pickup truck navigating the dusty roads. Nkem, a slender young woman with sun-kissed skin and a determined spirit, navigated the bustling market carrying a basket of freshly harvested vegetables. Her grandmother, Mama Adana, had been coughing heavily that morning, her frail body showing signs of another restless night. The morning sun cast long shadows across the market stalls as Nkem arranged her vegetables with practiced care. Each tomato, each pepper represented hope, hope for medicine, hope for better days. The scent of roasting corn mingled with the earthy smell of yams, creating the familiar aroma of home. Nkem, my child, the doctor's medicine is finished, Mama Adana had said earlier that morning, her voice barely above a whisper. But God will provide. She had pressed her weathered hand against Nkem's cheek, her touch as light as a feather, her eyes bright with fever. With those words lingering in her mind, Nkem walked tirelessly, haggling with buyers and smiling even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Her best friend, Afiba, a cheerful woman with a contagious laugh and eyes that sparkled with mischief, often joined her at the market. Afiba's sharp tongue kept exploitative customers at bay, and her company lightened Nkem's burdens. "These prices are fair," Afiba would declare, hands on her hips, challenging anyone who dared to argue. "Quality costs money, and Nkem's vegetables are the best in Umuk." Her presence was like a shield, protecting Nkem from the harsh realities of market life. That's when he appeared. Okonkwo. His presence was as commanding as the rumble of a storm. Tall, well-dressed in a crisp white kaftan, and with an air of confidence that turned heads, he approached Nkem's store. His polished shoes and gold wristwatch spoke of a wealth that was foreign to Umuk. The way he carried himself suggested power, influence, everything that seemed impossible in their humble village. "Are you Nkem?" he asked, his deep voice cutting through the market noise. The question carried weight, as if her answer would determine the course of fate itself. Startled, Nkem looked up from arranging a pile of fresh okra. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" He smiled, revealing perfect teeth. "I've heard of your hard work. I have an opportunity for you, one that will change your life and help your grandmother." His words dripped with honey, sweet and enticing. Afiba stepped closer, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "What kind of opportunity?" she asked bluntly, her protective instincts flaring. Okonkwo's smile didn't falter. "A job in the city. Good pay. Decent accommodation. Everything your grandmother needs." He pulled out a business card, the glossy surface catching the sunlight. "I help talented young people find better opportunities. Your reputation for hard work has reached my ears." Nkem hesitated, her heart torn between hope and caution. The weight of Mama Adana's illness pressed heavily on her shoulders. Afiba grabbed her arm, fingers digging into her skin. "Don't trust him, Nkem. We don't know who he is." But the promise of financial stability was too tempting to ignore. Nkem looked at her meager earnings for the day, barely enough for a week's worth of medicine. "Tell me more about this job," she said, even as Afiba's grip tightened in warning. The next morning dawned with a mix of fog and uncertainty. Nkem packed a small bag, her hands trembling as she folded her best dress. She kissed Mama Adana goodbye, the old woman's blessing falling like gentle rain on her shoulders. "May God protect you, my child," Mama Adana whispered, pressing a small wooden cross into Nkem's palm. Afiba stood at the edge of the village, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by worry. "Promise me you'll be careful," she pleaded, hugging Nkem tightly. "Promise me you'll come back if anything feels wrong." "I promise," Nkem said, the words feeling hollow even as she spoke them. "I'll send money as soon as I can." Okonkwo arrived in a sleek black car, the kind rarely seen in their village. The vehicle seemed out of place against the backdrop of mud houses and dirt roads, like a shark in a river. As the car sped away, Nkem looked out the window, watching the familiar sights of Umuk fade into the distance. The towering Iroko trees, the village square where children played, the small church with its tin roof, all disappeared like morning mist. Her first impression of the city was overwhelming. The skyscrapers reached toward the heavens like modern-day towers of Babel, their glass surfaces reflecting the harsh sun. The chaos of traffic, the endless streams of people, and the constant noise made her feel small and out of place. Everything moved too fast, too loud, too bright. Okonkwo took her to a modest apartment in a neighborhood that seemed to exist in the shadows of the gleaming city center. He handed her a stack of cash, the notes crisp and new. "For your grandmother," he said, his voice gentle but his eyes cold. "Your work begins tomorrow." That night, alone in the strange room, Nkem counted the money with trembling fingers. It was more than she would make in 3 months at the market. She sent a quick prayer of thanks heavenward, ignoring the small voice of doubt that whispered in her mind. But the next day brought confusion and terror. Instead of a legitimate job, Nkem was introduced to 2 stern-looking women whose eyes held no warmth. They ordered her to dress in clothes that made her skin crawl, to pose for photographs that made her want to disappear. When she refused, one of them slapped her hard across the face, the sound echoing in the small room. "Do as you're told, or you'll regret it," the woman hissed, her breath hot against Nkem's cheek. "You're ours now." Nkem soon realized the horrifying truth. Okonkwo had lured her into a dark world of exploitation. The apartment wasn't a safe haven but a prison, with cameras in every corner and guards posted at every exit. Other young women, their faces hollow with despair, shared the space like ghosts. They whispered stories of abuse and horrors too grim to recount, their voices barely audible over the constant hum of air conditioning that never quite masked the stench of fear. Back in Umuk, the rainy season arrived with its usual force, but something else hung heavy in the air: worry. Mama Adana grew increasingly anxious as days turned into weeks without word from Nkem. The money Okonkwo had given Nkem lasted only so long, and the old woman's cough grew worse with each passing day. Afiba, unable to shake her unease, began asking questions. She visited neighboring villages, showing Okonkwo's business card to anyone who would look. She discovered that no one in the village knew much about him, though the elders whispered of a man who had once lived among them but had vanished after being accused of unspeakable crimes. "The devil wears many masks," one elder told her, his roomy eyes filled with concern. "And the brightest smile often hides the darkest heart." "We need to find her," Afiba declared to Mr. Chokuma, the village's only secondary school teacher. Her resolve was firm, her voice steady despite the fear that clutched at her heart. Mr. Chokuma, a quiet man who had always shown kindness to his students, listened to Afiba's story with growing concern. "This sounds like something I've read about," he said, pulling out a worn newspaper. "There have been reports of young women disappearing across different states." With his help, Afiba managed to gather enough money to travel to the city. The entire village contributed what they could, a few naira here, a few there. Even the market women who had once competed with Nkem gave what they could spare. Meanwhile, Nkem's situation grew increasingly dire. Okonkwo's true nature revealed itself in stages, like a venomous snake slowly uncoiling. He operated a sophisticated network that trafficked young women and harvested organs for profit, using legitimate-looking businesses as fronts for his operation. Days blurred into nights as Nkem plotted her escape, enduring unimaginable horrors but clinging to the wooden cross her grandmother had given her. She learned to be invisible when necessary, to observe without being noticed. She mapped the guards' routines in her mind, noted which ones were cruel and which ones might show a moment of weakness. One night, she overheard a conversation between Okonkwo and his associates about a shipment to another country. The words made her blood run cold. They were planning to move several girls, including her, to a location where they would never be found. Fear gripped her, but it also gave her clarity. She knew she had to act fast. Using a small piece of wire she had carefully pried from a broken window frame, she began working on the lock of her room during the quiet hours of the night. Afiba's determination led her through the labyrinthine streets of the city, following leads that often led nowhere. But fate has a way of rewarding persistence. Through a chance encounter at a local church, she met James, a journalist who had been investigating Okonkwo's activities for months. "These people are dangerous," James warned, showing her files of missing persons reports and suspicious financial transactions. "But if what you're saying is true, this could be the break we've been waiting for." Together, they located the apartment complex where Nkem was being held. The rescue mission was risky, involving a daring plan and the cooperation of a few brave locals who had lost their own daughters to trafficking. When Afiba finally burst through the door and saw Nkem's bruised and terrified face, tears streamed down her cheeks. "We're taking you home," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. But their escape wasn't smooth. Okonkwo and his men gave chase, leading to a dramatic confrontation at a bustling market. In the chaos, it was Mama Blessing, a market woman who had lost her own daughter years ago, who turned the tide. With a heavy wooden pestle in hand, she struck Okonkwo from behind as he cornered Nkem and Afiba. Back in Umuk, Nkem's return was met with a mix of joy and sorrow. She bore scars, both physical and emotional, but she was alive. Mama Adana held her tightly, whispering prayers of gratitude, her tears falling freely. The village rallied around them. Women brought food and comfort, men stood guard, and children sang songs of welcome. But the nights were still hard. Nkem would wake up screaming, the memories of her ordeal haunting her dreams. Okonkwo's arrest exposed a larger network of criminals, and James's relentless reporting brought national attention to the issue of human trafficking and organ trade. For the first time in years, there was hope that justice would prevail. Other victims came forward, their stories creating a tapestry of survival and resilience. Months later, Nkem stood before a crowd at a community center, her voice steady as she shared her story. The audience included young women from surrounding villages, their eyes wide with understanding and determination. "I survived because I never stopped believing that someone would come for me," she said, her gaze finding Afiba in the crowd. "And now, we must stand together to ensure no one else falls into the shadows. The darkness is powerful, but our unity is stronger." As the audience applauded, Afiba squeezed her hand, a silent reminder that even in the darkest moments, friendship and courage could light the way. Mama Adana, healthy now thanks to proper medical care, watched from the front row, her eyes shining with pride. In the years that followed, Nkem and Afiba established a foundation to help other survivors and prevent more young women from falling prey to traffickers. Their story became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest places, the human spirit could triumph. The village of Umuk changed too. Mr. Chokuma included awareness programs in his teaching, and the market women created a network to watch over each other's daughters. They had learned that safety lay not in silence, but in solidarity. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun painted the sky in shades of hope, Nkem would stand in her grandmother's compound, listening to the familiar sounds of village life. The cocks crow, the chatter of market women, the rumble of trucks on dusty roads, they were no longer just background noise, but a symphony of freedom, a reminder that she had found her way back to light.